The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing, and addresses the assessment standards that requires learners to explore and explain key features of texts and how they contribute to meaning in poetry. Learners should be able to explain how word choices, imagery, and sound devices shape mood, meaning, and theme. Just like a painter chooses his colors, like a surgeon chooses which instruments to use, or like a pilot carefully plots a flight, a poet must select exactly the right words to construct his or her poem. In this lesson today, we're still discussing poetry, but we'll focus more on word choice. The words a poet chooses are very important because through the words, the poet creates setting, mood, and character and conveys the main ideas of the poem. The right words in the right place are extremely powerful. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to discuss how the meaning of a poem is affected by the choice of words. The poem we're going to use as our case study for this lesson is called Adriaanspoort by a very well-respected and talented South African poet, Sipho Sephamla.
Down there below where I can see no spoor of a man or animal, there is a winding of what used to be. There is a swaying of lanky tufts of grass. There is a meandering of leafy protea trees. There is an aging of variegated Pelindaba rocks. And there is a thought of dead spirits, one slashing by day only to retreat at sunset, leaving these parts wild at night, yet serene under the moon. Where I stand, there is no stench with which to live, only the giddy smell of bright boerewors. Already the plastic plates are full of stave mealepap. A table is laden with sliced cheese and green salads. For amidst the chattering of adults in French and the fooling around of our children in no language of words, we are going to revel beyond the mischievous hand of man. There is a spirit moving where we are. We turn faces to avoid it, hardly being successful. For we are part of being of things. There are clouds gathering above our heads, we say. It will not rain, hardly being correct, for the earth needs to be swept at times. It rains. Pula. It rains. Pula.
Let's look at the words which the poem has chosen to establish the setting of the poem. The setting is where the poem takes place. What is the setting of the poem? Look at the details we're given. First of all, there's the title of the poem, which is the name of a place, Adriaanspoort. The name sounds Afrikaans, so we can recognize by the sound that Adriaanspoort is in South Africa. Then there are the phrases like animalspoor, lanky turfs of grasses, leafy protea trees, and Pelindaba rocks. So all these words, animalspoor, lanky turfs of grass, leafy protea trees. All these words set the scene for us and indicate that the poem is set in the bush, not the city or town. We also know that the poet is looking down on the scenery from a point above. We know this because the poem starts with the line, down there below. The phrase that there is no spoor of man or animal tells us that the countryside is empty with only nature carrying on as usual. The wind blows, the grass, the trees grow, and the rocks are very slow crumbling. But then the words indicate that there is something going on in the poet's imagination. As he looks at the scene, he writes, there is thought, and this thought is about spirits. The poem also indicates that Adriaanspoort was once the location of a clash or a battle. This is referred to right at the beginning of the poem with the statement, "There is a winding of what used to be." How has the choice of words helped to create the scene for us? All the details have helped to create the setting in our imagination. We can see the grassy veld moving in the wind, the proteas, the rocks. From the words that are used, we're also able to work out the point of view that the poet, who is looking down from a higher point, and as we read this poem, this also becomes our point of view. We can conclude then that one effect of word choice is the following. Word choice affects meaning by vividly creating a setting. We can see all the details in our minds. There are other details in the second stanza that contrast with the silent, empty scene in the first stanza. Like in the first stanza, the first line gives us the brightest point of view, except this time it tells us about where he is standing, not what he's looking at. From these points, we see that he's now standing in the middle of a picnic with lots of people. He helps us to imagine the braai by using words that appeal to all our senses. The smell of boerewors, the taste and the sight of stewwe mieliepap, sliced cheese, green salads, the sound of the voices of the adults and children. By using so many adjectives, the scene comes alive and we can really imagine the food, the colors, the activity. So, from this stanza of the poem, we've seen that good word choice does more than just create setting. It almost puts you in the middle of it. We can see that word choices affects meaning by creating atmosphere. Atmosphere, the tone or mood created by a speech or piece of writing. In our previous lessons, we have said that mood or atmosphere creates a feeling in the reader about what kind of poem is being read, develops characterization, heightens impact. Back to the poem. Can you see how the poet has almost created two worlds and that each one has its own atmosphere? One is the quiet, empty veld down below with the wind and the grass and the bush and the dead spirits that move there. The other is up on the hill with noisy, busy picnic of people with their food and children and voices. So, word choice affects meaning by creating contrast. But there is one final and very important aspect to this poem. In the middle of these two worlds is the poet observing and describing. In the third stanza, we realize that the poem is about the land and the picnic with his friends. But Spamla is also using the contrast of the scenes and atmospheres to create a metaphor about people not paying attention to what is happening in the country. He talks about a spirit of change that is coming like a rainstorm to wash the country clean. It rains, pula. It rains, pula. So we can see that word choice sets the scene, creates atmosphere, creates contrast, and it can also be used to make symbols and metaphors. We'll be covering exactly how these symbols and metaphors work in more detail in the next lesson. The choice of words does not act alone. All the techniques of poetry work together to create meaning. What helps the choice of words in this poem is the skillful use of rhythm. Rhythm is the harmony produced by the regular repetition of a beat or accent. What do you notice about the rhythm of stanza 1? Let's just read the opening again.
Down there below where I can see no spoor of a man or animal, there is a winding of what used to be. There is a swaying of lanky tufts of grass. There is a meandering of leafy protea trees.
What do you notice about the rhythm of the lines? There is a very regular rhythm formed by a pattern that is repeated over and over. And every second line ends in a verb such as winding, swaying, meandering, aging, which is soothing and relaxing until it breaks with, there is a thought of dead spirits clashing by day. The poet uses the break in the rhythm to signal to us that for the first time that everything is not as simple as it seems. Now, look again at these lines. The second stanza, that is about the people, is written in the free verse. Free verse is more like the speech we use every day, which contrasts with the poetic verse of the first stanza. The third stanza is more philosophical and introduces the idea of political change being like rain that will wash away the past and make the country new. The short lines used on the stanza helps the poet to make the point. We've looked at the three stanzas of this poem. Now, for today's task, let's look at the last line. It rains, pula. It rains, pula. Comment on the words that are used in this line and the effects that they create. We have seen that word choice is important in poetry because the meaning of a line of poetry is conveyed through the choice of words. We have also seen how structure, which is verse form, and rhythm work together with the choice of words to create a complete effect. In our next lesson, we shall look at how another technique of writing imagery affects meaning in poetry. Until then, from me, Nkele Muzumi, goodbye.